there's so much I want to talk to you about in relation to this issue of disruption and innovation. And the first thing I thought, because I noticed that you've been quite strong on the problem of bundling them together, you know, that they're somehow in the same basket. Tell me how you view those two things and what that means for business.
Right. Well, in fact, you were going to ask me a separate question, but I want to pick up on is that there's a lot of discussion around we're great at scientific research, but we're very poor at commercialisation. And that's true, but there's a deeper set of issues sort of running here that I think is really important for Australia. I mean, firstly, we've got wonderful industries, and I think we forget about how strong we are in resources, how strong we are in financial services, food and ag, higher education, we're doing incredibly well at. These are wonderful industries that we need to keep innovating in, because if we lose them, that's going to have a significant impact on our economy and jobs. Now, I won't say jobs and growth for the Minister, but it is about jobs and growth. And then on the other hand, we've got this challenge around our research community. We have, in the top 10%, our scientists are ranked in the world, and that's across universities, CSIRO, private research institutes. I mean, absolutely outstanding. I mean, way above where you'd expect us to be. But we come unstuck in terms of taking those incredible insights and getting them to market. That's in the science area, but it also applies in the business innovation area. So, look, the easy stat is that in terms of venture capital or early stage capital, angels, we're at a factor of 30 to 40 below on a per GDP basis or even population basis what the US. But we have this enormous amount of money in the superannuation funds. So there's just this dislocation between great ideas, getting through that sort of process of getting them to market, both in scientific research but also in business. And then there's a bigger challenge of corporations, small and medium business, continue to innovate, reinvent themselves. So there's a multitude of issues there that we as a nation need to continue to really push into.
Okay, so where do we start with that? I mean, what are the obvious things? What's the low-hanging fruit that we could be looking at?
Well, look, because I come from a corporate end, I think it's absolutely critical that our large, corporations continue to reinvent themselves, because as we heard this morning, any startup is looking at how they can disrupt. So they've got to reinvent themselves. We don't want them to go away. We want them to continue. And we do want to create a stronger innovation and startup community, because that's healthy, it drives competition, helps us become more globally competitive. So we need to do both. Also, I'll come back and talk later on, we talk about jobs, about what the small and medium business market is important as well. Then in terms of the research community, we need to continue to celebrate and recognise the critical importance of that community. And I worry about that because coming into the research community, have been astounded at what wonderful people we have in Australia. I mean, absolutely, both in Australia and working around the world. But gee, they don't talk to each other. It is worrying.
Why do you think that is?
Oh, gee, if I had the answer to that, it would probably...
Well, that's what Advance is about.
Well, it is. Look, these meetings are really important because we get an opportunity to talk and interact. But it is crazy. I mean, our universities are world class, so you can see where we rank. CSIRO's world class, private research groups. But even between that, we're not coordinating. Then when you look at industry policy, how do we provide a blueprint where we can get innovative ideas coming through, partner with industry and academics? For example, why don't more professors, or private sector people cross over? I mean, it's sort of like, and maybe the academics can talk today, there's not as much flow as in the US between academics and then getting the commercial market, and we need it. We need it. And that's where the CRCs in Australia have been good, as have been the growth centres. So I think that when you say to me, what do we need to do? There's no magic answer. We've got to keep working on all these fronts and having meetings like this where we talk about it. People say, well, I can't get money. I've spoken to people, or they talk about this, and we start talking, we find solutions. That's what I think, Jenny.
When people talk about innovation, they often talk about startups and, apps.
Yes.
And someone described it to me the other day as a bit like grandpa dancing, you know, that people get very excited about talking about those things.
Yeah.
And this person was saying...
Grandpa dancing.
Grandpa dancing, yeah.
Okay.
And so this person was saying to me, you know, that the discussion needs to also be about sustainability in business and the importance of innovation, including that definition. Would you agree with that? I mean, it seems pretty obvious that...
Well, look, I obviously do. But I think both play a different role. I mean, you know, if you're running a big corporation, and you know, there's people here tonight. I mean, Doug and Glenn. You know, they run very big companies. It's very hard to create. You organise your business for optimisation, and you've got to be trying to keep looking ahead. It's a difficult job, and you want innovation. It's both cultural, but you also need to invest in new ideas. That's why R&D is so important. That's why R&D tax credits are so important. We want to stimulate that. Now, at times you get caught, and it's wonderful to have you know, companies that are smaller and agile, who can not bound by legacy and all the challenges you have with that, to come in and disrupt. So you need both, and that's where you really go ahead as a nation. So it's not an either-or. It's how do we work together to create these attitudes of continual reinvention, of looking at markets as opportunities. Yes, we've got challenges, and trying to work together, but we're just, I won't say we're bad at it, we're just not as good as we could be.
How could we be better?
Well, I think it's about, I mean, personally, I think it's more cultural than anything else. You've got to create in your organisations this openness and transparency to new ideas. New ideas can be threatening to establishment. I mean, it's in every society that's been the case. So you've got to get a culture where people are welcoming of new ideas. The constant, you've all heard this, you know, continual learning, putting yourself out there. That's why at Telstra we did the venture companies and Marudi. It was less about the investment. It was more about getting ideas into the company. I think the smaller companies or the startups benefited from that. They had to learn about cash flow and actually, you know, paying salaries and all those important things. We learned about different ways to think about things. So if we can get that flow going, and I do think government policy plays an important part in that, in terms of creating the framework. But government should provide frameworks, and then business should get on and do it. And we need to partner with the academic community. That's very important. There's just enormous skill sets there, and we've heard about quantum today. You've got Data 61 working really well at CSIRO. You've got what CSIRO is doing. So that's what I think we should do.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about how you're using disruptive techniques in the roles that you're in at the moment. Let's talk a bit about Jobs New South Wales as well as CSIRO. What are you doing there to help employers create jobs, and how are you approaching that task?
Right. Can I talk CSIRO just for a moment?
Yeah, sure.
I'll come back to Jobs New South Wales, because that's a slightly different approach. Well, look, CSIRO, I'm delighted to say, I mean, CSIRO, as you know, I mean, it really is a world-class publicly funded research organisation set up to really provide great science partnering with industry, working both on national issues as well as specific industry opportunities. And getting that balance is always difficult, as you see in the press, and they're very keen to point out when we're sort of leaning one way or the other. But you do need to put systems in place. So we've got the acceleration program where we try to work with the scientists, have a great idea, and help them understand how to, you know, possibly commercialise it, knowing that commercial outcomes are not always the only thing. It could be a social outcome. It could be about water management in the territory, how we become, you know, create a better agrarian base up there. So really important that, and then setting up innovation hubs. But I would put it to the CSIRO team, and I know there's a number here today, it's about attitude too. You've got to be externally focused. You've got to be good at what you do, but you've got to keep reaching out to the community so you're a part of it, both industry and with universities. There's been a lot of discussion around, you know, competition between universities and CSIRO. I don't see it. We're 24 million people, for goodness sake, and we just need to get on and work together and not worry about federation or anything. We need to find ways to move forward. But I'm not going to solve federation today.
No, any before you have tried.
Yeah, but so that's that.
Jobs New South Wales, yeah?
Yeah, well, I think that it does relate to the Minister's comments this morning. So for those who don't know, Jobs in New South Wales was set up by Mike Baird to take about $250 million and say, how do we create jobs in New South Wales? And we sort of, what had normally happened within the political process is, funding made available to, a business in Albury Wodonga and, who's setting up an abattoir, and someone gets an opportunity to cut a ribbon. And we stepped up and said, look, this is wrong. Look, sometimes you've got to do those things, but what we wanted to see was, we looked at the future and we looked at all those reports that said that 40 to 50% of all jobs are going to be automated or tasked within 10 to 20 years. Even if it's half wrong, it doesn't matter. It's sort of a trend. We said, look, we're not going to look at that. We're going to say, how do we create 1 million new jobs, net new jobs, in New South Wales in the next 15 to 20 years? Now, it suddenly changes your whole perspective on the issue. You've got to assume there's going to be changes in industry structure. You've
Well,
got to
the
look
scale of it makes
the
you,
scale of it, yeah. So we're what? In New South Wales, 3.7 million people work, that's defined as generally full-time work, a little bit of part-time in there. And we want to go to 4.8 by 2030, whatever it is, 33. And so that whole orientation changed our view. Now, Craig actually, I think Craig said, or was it, I can't remember who said it this morning, talked about job growth in the last 5 years. Interesting stats in New South Wales. The last 6 years, there have been 500,000 jobs created. 600,000 have gone from the corporate sector, and there have been over 1 million jobs created in the small and medium business market. That is astounding numbers. And out of that million, we have a very strong small and medium business base here in New South Wales, and there's a normal mum and pop store, but it's about 5 to 6% of them are what we call gazelles, are these very fast-growing companies who grow at 20, 30, 40% growth in terms of employment, and they can start at 10 to 15, and they can scale up to thousands really quickly. So we've sort of changed the way we're approaching. We're trying to find these gazelles, and they have an enormous problem in getting access to capital because they don't have a history. And the banks are very reticent to lend to them. So we're looking at sort of some creative financing vehicles to help them get over the hump. Now, this is not the early stage, angel investing. This is sort of usually a company that's been going for about 2 to 3 years. But they seem to be the ones where you're getting enormous employment growth. Because I'm of the school that if you create jobs, the economy grows, you get greater social equity, and you get infrastructure growth, etc. The other really interesting thing which relates to this audience is that in New South Wales, 70% of all the jobs created have been from the domestic economy, not export-led. And I think this relates to our aspiration that as a nation we're not, looking externally enough. Now, I do hear these talks around US and Europe. Look, what's the population of Indonesia? 3rd most populous country in the world. I don't want to really talk about the Philippines, but there is 100 million people there. I may not want to go there right now. Vietnam, 100 million people, and then you go to China. So I worry about people saying that we're geographically isolated. We are at the heart of the Asian century, as Kenny.
And there are great opportunities there.
So we're trying to look at how we can stimulate the export growth, create real jobs here in Australia, partner with the wonderful people working around the world. So they're the sorts of things we're working on. But I could go on.
One thing I wanted to ask you about as well, which I've talked to you about before, is this view that 6 million Australians need digital retraining. How are we going to do that?
Well, with great
6
difficulty.
million Australian workers, I think was the figure.
Yeah, I think that was. I mean, if you say 40 to 50% of all tasks are going to be automated, artificial intelligence, even looking at augmented reality. Look, they're about skill set building. And if you look, if I looked at Telstra or look at CBA, the banks, or even Wesfarmers, they're digitally enabling their workforce today. So I think it's about the new people coming into the workforce, and that's why we've got to look at the curriculums. I was just meeting with Mark Scott the other day, who's now at education, wasn't that great? A guy who's been in the ABC media, now running education in New South Wales. He's now looking at the curriculum that he needs to have available by 2020. So how do you build those digital-enabled skills into the students, and then you've got to look at TAFE, you look at universities, and then you've got retraining in the corporations as well. So, look, it's a big effort, but hey, this is an opportunity. I don't see it negatively. I see this as an incredible opportunity for us to take the lead. And yes, we've gone through changes before, but it's those who are bold enough to step into them.
For a long time, we've had a large rebound rate. I mean, Craig talked about his, fears and anxieties about coming back,
Yeah, I can relate to
and the difficulties of the first couple of years.
Yeah.
Do you think there's more of a focus now on people with international experience being embraced in Australia? And I just wonder how we deal with that still. Do you have views on that?
Yeah, I do. I'm not sure we're much better, to be honest. And I think that's why Advance plays such a critical role in helping that facilitation of people returning. Look, it is difficult on boards. I know boards talk about it a lot because they're trying to get more global perspective onto the boards, and sometimes they'll go to look for people from Asia or the US or Europe to come on the board. That's very difficult because you're asking someone to come to Australia, one, to understand the responsibility as a director. Secondly, you ask them to travel 6 times a year. If they're coming from Europe or the US, you're probably taking out a week for a 1.5 day meeting. So that's one side. The other side is about great Australians had great experience working internationally. When they come back, it's hard for them to get re-established. And I think it's partly attitudinal in the executive teams. It's partly, we've got to put some responsibility on the individual. You've got to keep connected back to Australia. You can't just sort of walk in and say, here I am. You've got to keep these connections live. So, but I think we, in Australia, we need to appreciate, encourage and celebrate more of the Australians. And that's why the celebration point is so important too. So more to do.
Go on.
No, that's good.
So tapping into that global talent pool, how?
Well, I think it is things like Advance. I think the only way I know how to do that, because I've gone to look for people to come and work in organisations, sometimes it's very hard to find them. And I don't know if there's any headhunters here today, they don't necessarily help you in identifying where Australians are. And so we need people who have some way to promote themselves and then to get connected. And there is no other organisation like Advance, and that's why we need to make this richer and better going forward. Now, look, as I said, I think individuals have got to reach out and make connections when they come back, when they've been offshore, because you do get disconnected. There's no question of that. So that's the only way I know how to do it. Universities are good. I think the alumni program from universities, they go out, and we maybe need to do more of that through Austrade and DFAT, do more in terms of just involvement. But I think, Ken, that was really why Advance was established, because there was nothing else established.
So the message you want to get to this group today around innovation and disruption,
keep doing it. Look, I just think there's such... I'm an optimist. I mean, if you read a lot of the impacts of technology, there's some people who are getting quite concerned about the impact on society. I'm incredibly optimistic about the opportunity. And I think we need to create in Australia the celebration of what people do, from great scientific research through to innovative ideas and disruption, and support them. That's why I like incubators and accelerators. It creates this sort of world of sort of excitement. But at the same time, you need to be realistic about it is not easy. It's really hard, and you need to take a global perspective as you do it. The wonderful thing about technology today is it does allow you to have a global perspective. In fact, if you don't, I'm afraid that the Australian market is just not big enough. So I think we've got to have a big aspiration. So you asked me, we've got to keep trying to restructure and make sure there's funding available for people to get into these disruptive areas. Secondly, we need to continue to drive collaboration and celebrate each other. And so celebrating the great people tonight is great, but we need to do more of it. I mean, did you listen to who's the great, the best scientist in Australia? Did you see that this week?
No, I didn't. But I've been away.
Oh, that's okay. Well, excuse me, but
I'm allowed.
Yeah, you're allowed. But there was Michael Shine, does incredible work with reptiles. He's probably one of the world's most, distinguished professors. And we don't even get. I think we get a 2-page, 2-inch sort of article about it.
Yeah, this is a constant.
So we don't celebrate it, and so we need to do more of that as we go forward. So we need to collaborate far more, and then we have a bigger aspiration. We can't, as a nation, 24 million people. We need to think bigger, and if we do that, then I think we can, play our place in the world.
Thank you very much, David. Great to talk to you.
No, great to see you too.
And would you please thank David Thodey.